good. We hope to be joined by some other officials as well, and we invite them to speak. The purpose of this rally is to highlight the most recent bill, but not the first bill, that has come through the House of Representatives and on to the Senate, which represents the agenda that has been pushed by the current majority. Now, the majority of the House is serving in their second term, so these bills are bills that we have seen in the prior cycle. H.R. 22, the SAVE Act, is just one of about 10 similar type bills that have been pushed before us. There's a bill called Laken Riley that has passed. It passed the House twice. I voted no both times. There's a bill called Fix Our Forests, which would fix them pretty good. That passed the House. There was a bill that's identified for Gentleman Raul Gonzalez, honoring him. That passed the House. There's a bill called Born Alive. That passed the House. And in every one of these bills, the title was very enticing. It was meant to be something that you would say, yes, let us fix our forests. Yet, let us save lives. Let us do the right thing. But the details of the bill show that there is far more to the bill than just the title. And the SAVE Act, while it identifies we want to root out a fraudulent vote that may come from a person who's not an American citizen, when you look at the bill text and you understand the ramifications of it, it does much, much more than that. So when you see somebody on Facebook that says, why shouldn't we have voter ID? That's not the totality of this bill. This bill goes much further. What this bill basically does is eliminate most of the things that we do in registering to vote or changing our registrations by doing it by mail. That has been a major change in the last number of years here in New York and other states to make it easier for you to vote. If you change your address, if you change your voter registration status, if you change your name, you're married, you're divorced, or you just change your name, you can do that by mail right now. The principle of the SAVE Act says, no, you can't do that by mail. You have to go in person to in this case, the County Board of Elections here in White Plains. Now, if you live in White Plains, like Tom Roach does, that's a very pleasant trip. But if you live in Somers or North Salem or Peekskill or Southwest Yonkers or Pelham Manor, it is a major effort to come to the Board of Elections. And if you come to the Board of Elections for a legitimate reason, that's fine. But when it's make work, what happens is people may not do it. They may miss a step. And if they miss a step, then they don't vote. And then this becomes voter suppression. Let me also say that what they want you to prove is your U.S. citizenship. You prove your U.S. citizenship, and they list a couple of documents. Your birth certificate. How many of you have your birth certificate on you? Raise your hand if you got your birth certificate on you. Nobody. How many of you have access to your birth certificate at home in a file someplace, which you may be confined if you take some time to find it? How many of you would go back to the community of your birth to get a new birth certificate if you absolutely had to have it? And how many of you hail from a community that's nowhere near here? And getting a birth certificate is difficult. Now, in a group like this, how many of you have a passport? How many of you don't have a passport? How many people do you think in this society don't have passports? And can't then therefore use that to verify their U.S. citizenship? Now, we live in a society when a woman gets married, she makes a choice. Does she retain her birth name? Does she take on her husband's name as a family name? And that's a personal choice. Each woman decides in her family what to do. And should she marry or should she divorce, that name legally changes as she sees fit. When that name changes, you have to go to the County Board of Elections to let them know that. And if you're working in New York City, you're going to have to take a day off because the Board of Elections operates on a Monday through Friday schedule. And when you show up, you'd better have your birth certificate with you, or you're going to have to go back home and find your birth certificate and take another day off work to come to let them know that you now have a different last name. If you change your party registration, if you're an independent and you decide you want to be a member of one of the 4 standard registered parties, then you have to go to the Board of Elections to do that. And when you go to the Board of Elections, if you've early voted or voted on a day of high turnout, there's a long line, and you chew up a lot of time waiting to do something that we in New York do simply by checking a box and sending it in. Why do we do that? Because it makes it easier for people to vote in their busy lives. If you lie on that form, if you assert that you have the right to vote, and you're not legal to vote, or any of the other assertions are wrong, your address is wrong, any of these things, you're subject to penalties. You've already committed an infraction, and depending on what it is, a more serious infraction. So the concept that you have to go another step is an unnecessary step. It's being done in Georgia. It's being done in Texas. It's being done in Alabama, Mississippi. This law would make it the law in New York and Massachusetts and California and states that have chosen not to do this, because these are states that believe that we have an honest voting system as it exists today. We had migrant placements in Westchester County. And in those migrant placements here in White Plains, in Ardsley, and in Yonkers, we had up to a total of, at the highest peak, a little over 500 people residing there. Not one incident where any one of those individuals appeared at a voting precinct in White Plains or Ardsley or Yonkers asserting that they could vote. Not one incident. There's not one election, there's not one report of a significant amount of fraud that warrants this type of action. So why would you do this type of action? You might say, yes, the first time you vote, we'd like to see voter ID. You voted for 10 years and you changed your last name. Why do I have to go to White Plains to prove that I am the same person with a married last name? Why would you have to do that? Because the mission behind this is voter suppression. The mission behind it is to try to get less of you to vote. Because if less people vote, those who are committed to vote may be able to determine the outcome of an election. We've had no elections in this state that have been pivoted on an accusation of illegal voting. Not one. Not one. So this bill is looking for the problem to solve that doesn't exist, and its solution is a hammer that will stop easy voter expression and send us backwards, not forwards. Now, if the sponsors of this bill were to say, gee, George, you've made a couple of good points here. Let's amend the bill. Then there would be a discussion. And that discussion might present a bill that might be workable. But that's not what's happening here. It's the same bill that passed last year, and I'm trying to be nonpartisan about it, but it passed with 100% support on one side of the aisle and 5 members on the other side of the aisle supporting it. And that same bill is the bill that's coming back again before us next week. No effort to hear any of the concerns, no effort to modify it. And those concerns have been expressed. The League of Women Voters of the U.S. has issued a document that explains the problems with this bill in great detail. The AFL-CIO National has laid out the case for why this is a bad bill. The NAACP at the highest levels have articulated why this is voter suppression. So you would think, if you read any of those documents, you would say, hey, let's get the bill fixed so that the bill could be a bill that all of us could support, and then we could have a bipartisan check and balance if you're afraid of the concern. None of those things have been done.